Welcome to the Underscore Transformation Podcast. My name's Jason West.
And my name's Joe Ailes.
And together we're the founders of Underscore. In Season 2, we're focusing on implementation and the challenges that surround making changes to policies, processes, systems, and team structures. If you'd like to know more about scoping a transformation program, please take a listen to Season 1. Now, this is the last of our 10 critical success factors in the build phase of transformation. Today, we're going to discuss the challenges and pitfalls that surround program governance and control during the build phase. A good proportion of effective governance is rooted in the design of your governance structure. Now, we covered governance design in our previous season on scoping, so please take a listen to episode 7 of season 1 for further information on the key governance roles and decision-making bodies, the speed and quality of decisions required, and the costs of indecision, delay, reversal, and rework. The design of your governance structure is one thing that we covered previously. Ensuring that you make the right decisions at the right time, that's another story. So successful governance requires having the right people in the right roles, meeting regularly, reviewing the right information, and being empowered to make decisions quickly. So, Joe, what's the best way of making sure this happens?
Well, Jason, unsurprisingly, it comes down to people, right? So we talked about the importance of everyone working on a program to have documented role descriptions way back in episode 1. And this is equally true for those in governance roles. You also need to have terms of reference well documented for each of the decision making groups within your structure.
What would typically be in those kind of terms of reference?
The purpose of each of the groups, their accountabilities, the responsibilities, what authority do they have to make decisions? That's equally important. The scope, what are they there to cover? And being careful that you don't overlay, scope of decisions across your different groups. So that's key. What's the escalation paths? For instance, if in one governance structure, one individual or a group of individuals feel really, really strongly about something, how do they escalate it to? How do they ensure it gets escalated to, for instance, maybe an exec steerco, et cetera, or a project board, et cetera? Mm-hmm. Then some simple logistics around, what's the meeting purpose and their frequency. What regular information is going to be reviewed by what groups in the governance structure, what records are to be kept, etc. And then, of course, there's unfortunately for a lot of programs, there's an awful lot of reporting that needs to be produced.
And actually documenting this stuff ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You don't want to have to. No program manager or transformation lead should be winging this on the fly. It needs to be properly discussed ahead of time, properly planned, a set of reviews with perhaps even the exec sponsor ahead of it going into an exec steerco, for instance. So there's an awful lot of stakeholder management and aligning sort of mindsets and along the way. So this is not just about getting people in a room and expecting lots and lots of decisions to be made in a room. There's an awful lot that goes on outside these formal meetings. But nonetheless, the formal meetings are really important to bring key decisions perhaps to a head, or key points in a program to a head. Yeah. So the other thing we also need to think about is what's the capability and motivation of the people that you place in these various decision-making bodies, right? And just to remind ourselves of who these are. So you've got obviously all the process owners. Yeah. You've got your design authority. You've got your operational steering committee, and you've got your exec steering committee. These are the sort of four key groups. You may have other ones. Maybe might be a technology one or an integrations one, but these are the groups that are going to govern your program. Yeah. And in previous episodes, we also talked about the risks of putting enthusiastic amateurs into key roles in the program. And this is, again, true for people making decisions within the governance structure. Yeah. It's the role of the sponsor, really, to identify any skills or knowledge gaps in various committees, and maybe put steps in place to close these gaps before programs get in full swing. And we talk a lot about formal training, coaching, mentoring for those in these governance structures, because these individuals are playing an instrumental role in the program, so they need to be equipped with the skills and capability to help steer in whatever governance structure or governance body they sit in.
Yes,
that's key.
I think that's where actually documenting the role profiles ahead of appointing people into these kind of key governance roles comes in really useful, because it gives that framework to be able to spot any gaps early and put those right interventions in place, whether that's coaching or mentoring or formal training, whatever it is. And there often are gaps, because you tend to be pulling people out of operational roles to fulfill these new program or project roles. Sure. So naturally there are gaps. Tends to be less so at the more senior level, at the exec steerco, because typically people have got experience of sponsoring or acting at that kind of senior exec level.
But you know what, the sponsor sometimes needs
absolutely
needs a little bit of coaching, because they're now guiding a program that they've probably not done before. Transformation projects don't get done every year, like we've talked about before. This is probably once, twice in a professional career of a sponsor. So they really need to be equipped to challenge the program manager, the transformation lead, even those on the exec steering committee about aspects of the project. So they need to be equipped with the skills and capability, don't they?
Yeah, and really addressing that right up front as early as you possibly can. Identify where your gaps are and actually put steps in place to fill them. But I think another aspect of it is around the thinking styles of the individuals involved, and making sure that you've got a real diversity of thinking styles in your different decision-making bodies. Because in large part, transformation is a problem-solving process. And the real challenge with this is some of the problems are puzzles and some are mysteries.
Puzzles and mysteries, Jason.
Yes, bear with me here. I'm probably going to go on a bit of a wander.
Okay.
But I think it's an important point to kind of raise. So Gregory Treverton wrote an article in 2007, which you can find in the Smithsonian magazine online. Do a Google search,
right,
that describes this difference between puzzles and mysteries, and how you need to approach them, because it is different. So I'll read you a quote from the article, and
right.
Bear with me. So,
okay, I am bearing with you. Yeah.
So puzzles can be solved; they have answers. But a mystery offers no such comfort. It poses a question that has no definitive answer, because the answer is contingent. It depends on a future interaction of many factors, known and unknown. So a mystery cannot be answered. It can only be framed. And by identifying the critical factors and applying some sense of how they have interacted in the past and might interact in the future, a mystery, therefore, is an attempt to define ambiguities. So that's the quote. Let me just unpack that a bit more, because there's kind of a lot going on there. So another really interesting writer, Malcolm Gladwell, kind of expanded on this. So he wrote an article in the New Yorker called Open Secrets. And again, do a Google, it's a great article, have a look at it. But boiling down, sort of his great work to a great article to, a really simple idea. The whereabouts of Osama bin Laden was a puzzle with a definitive answer that was, at the time, 2007, unsolved, because US intelligence didn't have enough information. They just needed to gather information to understand where he was. But in contrast, another problem at the time is what should happen in Iraq after Saddam Hussein was removed. That was a mystery. So there wasn't a simple factual answer. Mysteries kind of required judgments and assessment of uncertainty. And the hard part of it was not a lack of information, but actually there was too much information. So the CIA had a position on post-war Iraq, so did the Pentagon and the State Department, and Colin Powell and Dick Cheney, and as did everybody, commentators the world over, whether it was Fox News, MSNBC, or whoever. So trying to just kind of find your way through that's really quite difficult. It's not a case of just uncovering information and finding the answer. There's actually just a lot of noise in the system. And kind of bringing it right up to date, the search for an effective vaccine for the novel coronavirus is a puzzle that will ultimately be solved. But when and how quickly to lift lockdown conditions, well, that's a mystery. There's so many different contingent parts to this that actually there's no one simple answer. And you can't know it all at the very beginning.
This is really, really interesting, but what does it actually have to do with program governance?
Okay, I was getting to that. So within your governance bodies, you need to have a bit of a mix of people with these different problem-solving approaches, because they are different. So some people have a real natural focus on uncovering new information to solve puzzles and really digging into the absolute detail and kind of real dog with a bone, getting to that kind of ta-da, we've solved the puzzle. But you also need people that have got to focus on the bigger picture and picking out the signal amongst the noise of all this different information that kind of flows through the governance of your program. And that a lot of that's about, framing what's going on and being able to spot the risks and how to really deal with that as part of uncovering this kind of mysterious destination that you have, because it's not always very clear when you start on these programs. So that there's that slight dichotomy between people looking at the big picture and others really focused on the detailed practicalities.
Right. So a transformation is a mixture of puzzle and mystery.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in terms of those kind of personality traits, there's other aspects to this, and you need to look for the balance in your governance structures. So you need to have a bit of a balance between introverts and extroverts. So they bring complementary strengths when taking on and processing information, and you need to be careful about how you manage that interaction between introverts and extroverts, and you give introverts enough time to take on information, and you make sure the extroverts don't kind of shout everything down and kind of they're the only voice heard, and the usual interplay that you get between those kind of people with tendencies more in one direction or another. But a lot of that is really about how people process information that they're receiving in from the world. Likewise, having a balance of people that are more kind of people focused and others who are more outcome and objective focused. And that can be a bit of a challenge, more at the senior end, at the exec end, because in certainly Western society, we do tend to promote people who are more outcome and objective focused than they are people focused. So that can be a bit of a challenge in the more kind of senior steering committees, but that's a problem with the execs generally, if you can generalize. But you'd also expect that a successful program will have a lot of people who are very discipline driven. So these are people who are always on time for meetings. They love planning. They like clear written objectives. They're really ordered, and they work best in a structured environment. And unsurprisingly, we've spent quite a bit of time on these podcasts talking about those types of traits and issues and things that you just need to do. But that shouldn't be at the expense of people who are more kind of inspiration driven. Yeah. So these are people who prefer to see how things emerge, don't like to be tied down too early to any given solution, and like to keep their options open until a deadline emerges, and that kind of gives them lots of energy, and off they go and start doing stuff. But they're rarely on time for meetings if people are really on that kind of inspiration-driven spectrum, and they rely a lot on gut instinct to make decisions, and they're not afraid to bend the rules to achieve something really kind of unique and interesting. So if you have everybody too much in one direction on your in your decision making bodies and in your program team, you can get into difficulties with it. Yeah. So having that real mix allows you to get the best possible outcome from your transformation.
So yeah, you're right, Jason, and it's one of the areas that's so often overlooked when building program teams and governance teams. It's the whole diversity of thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we talked before about having multifunctional program structures. Having people from different functions being part of the program.
Yeah, different business units as well.
Exactly.
Different areas of the business. Yeah.
So this is another angle of sort of diversity of thinking and diversity of behavior that needs to be incorporated into your program structure.
Yeah.
So, and again, it can be a little bit too easy sometimes to populate teams with people who all think alike. So you end up with groupthink solution designs that really only work for the people like us. So that diversity of thought is really, really important. And again, if you have solution designs that only work for people like us, there's risks that are underestimated or sometimes completely overlooked because you don't have those people that are incredibly interested, for instance, in a detail. And if you've got just individuals there, like you've just outlined just a second ago, inspirational, that turn up late for meetings every time. And
we don't know anyone like that at all.
No, we don't know anyone like that. They are blue sky thinkers. You can perhaps think that a lot of the detail is going to go unnoticed. So it is really, really useful then to apply, psychometric tools for analyzing individuals and team personality and the characteristics of the teams, just making sure that you've got a good balance of behavior and thinking in among the various teams. And I think at some point we'll absolutely get Lucy Feeney, our head of leadership development, to talk to us about how to best deploy these tools for building high-performing teams in a future episode, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a great idea because it's important not just for program and governance teams, but it's got an application across any type of team. So definitely worth getting Lucy to provide some insight, as she's got loads of practical experience that she can share, and there's lots of great tools out there. And sort of what I described there was actually Lumina's tool largely, but they're all based on similar principles. It's the big 5 Jungian personality traits, but I won't go into that now. We'll cover that we'll get Lucy in, who actually really knows what she's talking about on this stuff, rather than get my hackneyed approach to it. So we've put together our diverse governance committees. We've defined their terms of reference, and we're all up and running. What do program sponsors need to keep a lookout for when it comes to the behaviours of these various steering committees? What are those warning signs to look for?
Yeah, and you need to keep an eye out on a level of constructive challenge that's going on within the various steering committees.
Yeah.
Are people challenging solutions with an aim of making things better, aligned to the strategic program objectives that we've talked about previously, for instance?
Yeah.
Or are they finding reasons for things to remain the same?
Yeah.
Maybe protecting empires or empire building. There's all sorts of things like that you've got to be sort of mindful of. You streamlining a process or automating a process will mean that my function or my teams in my functional areas are going to be impacted by this. So I don't necessarily like to deal with that change. So it is an awful lot of that they sort of need to be mindful of. The transformation lead absolutely needs to be on top of it, and so there's a sponsor.
Yeah.
Something else that a sponsor needs to look at is how quickly are solution designs making their way through the various governance reviews. Are solution designs getting stuck at particular steering committees? If so, where? Maybe at operational steering committee, for instance, where actually there's a lot of reluctance for people to want to change. So they're challenging every decision, every change to process, to policy, etc. Because actually, they're change resistant.
So watch out for the speed with which things are moving or not moving through those different committees, whether it's design authority or operational steerco.
And the exec steerco should expect decisions to air at exec steering committee, even if it's we've made this major decision down at the operational steering committee, and this is the impact it will have on our business. So exec steerco, this is something that are you comfortable with? This is something that you need to almost approve. I wouldn't suggest that everything goes up to exec steer committee for approval, but there are some real fundamental decisions that get made at a program level that are high impact, and those need to be aired and expressed during those exec steering committees. So if the exec steering committee is not seeing any of that, then the exec steerco should be a little bit concerned.
You're listening to the Underscore Transformation Podcast. For more practical guidance on business transformation, you can download our free transformation checklist. Visit our website underscore-group.com/insights.
So if you're seeing stuff that's getting stuck and it's not progressing through, what are the kind of the underlying factors that could be causing that?
Issues with design. You may need to address the solution design capability of the process owners, for instance. Again, you're asking operational people typically to be almost engineer new ways of working, and some of these individuals may not be capable of doing that. So again, we're going back to training, the capability point that we made earlier.
Yes.
Are these individuals sort of applying design thinking principles to the way they're designing processes and their role? So again, I think it could be a combination of things, but that's probably one area.
It could be to do with maybe you haven't selected the right technology.
The technology, yes, absolutely.
Technical limitations
in what you're trying to implement. So you've set out a whole set of strategic objectives that you're not going to deliver because the technology platform that you've got in front of you isn't going to enable you to do that. Again, if the design authority or steering committee is being sort of overly challenged, have the design principles again been set correctly, or are committee members sufficiently bought into the overall vision and the need to change? So that's something to think about as well.
Yeah, and again, getting that scoping right and making sure that people are sufficiently bought in and that you do have these design principles and this vision that people actually recognise and they're excited about.
Yeah, and have those at the forefront of every, almost as a reminder of what we're trying to achieve here. We're bringing this decision to you because it relates to this particular strategic objective, or it relates to this design principle. It's a design principle that we often see within sort of software as a service transformation program. Enabled transformation programs is keeping things simple. Simple design try to use as much out of the box as possible. So if you're coming up with an overly engineered process to almost achieve in that new technology what you do today, then you have to sort of be asking difficult questions of those process owners, the design authority, and a transformation leader and a program manager for that matter.
Yeah. So that's kind of the causes behind things might get stuck and what to look out for. But on the other hand, there's the other side to it, isn't there? There's that kind of how quickly everything's just getting nodded through. That could also be a bit of a warning sign.
Yeah, absolutely. That means it's the decisions have not been challenged perhaps enough in various sort of governance bodies. The level of detail hasn't perhaps been looked at. That diverse thinking hasn't been applied. Some of the designs haven't really been tested thoroughly enough. So if you are starting off on a project and you just see a whole bunch of decisions quickly rise up to you as a program sponsor, you go, hang on a minute, who has validated this? Who has checked this? Have we made sure that it's been tested? The design thinking has been tested across other functional areas of our business. Are we sure this is not going to break something further down the line? So have an inquisitive mind and a curious mind. But again, it's not about overly challenging. It's about making sure that you're challenging the right way, because it can be quite disheartening if, as a transformation lead or as a program manager, if you feel that you're going into battle each time. It's not about that.
Yes.
It's not about that. And it's not about creating the resistance. It's about watching out, like we talked about before, and just now. It's about what are the signs that you need to sort of go, hang on a minute. Is this a worry bead here? These are one of my worry beads.
Yeah. So if a sponsor or a transformation lead kind of sees some of this slightly worrying behaviour or potential risk areas, what should they do?
They need to go and speak to people. Meet individuals of your steering committee to make sure that they're comfortable challenging solutions they're put forward for review. You may find that process owners are just hitting it out of the park.
It's fine. They're just they've designed some great stuff and
cracking through it.
There's we've reviewed it. It's fantastic. It's going to be great.
Yeah, but as a sponsor, I would want to validate that.
Yes.
However, you also may find that people are reluctant to speak up during committee meetings, or feel they're not sufficiently empowered to make decisions. So they feel sort of almost fearful of challenging as well. So you need to create that sort of openness environment as well. You
can often see that with certain types of program manager that come in that are that kind of very much kind of just focused absolutely on hitting a deadline no matter what, and they're just driving stuff through, and they're not allowing sufficient time for people to challenge, and they kind of come as the big expert from outside that's done this a million times. Absolutely.
And actually they are purposely avoiding those difficult conversations with an aim to just getting stuff over the line. As a program sponsor, you need to sort of also be mindful of that and be aware of that. And as a transformation leads need to be skilled. Again, transformation leads wouldn't have done this in the past. They don't have experience. So a program sponsor, as well as a transformation lead, need to be given the tools and capabilities to lead these big programs through their life cycle. So it is, and bringing, sometimes, if you bring in a program manager that's purely focused on hitting timelines and misses the bigger picture, then we're in no end of trouble. You're really required to sort of have work done on the whole team dynamic of the committee as well. Between the program team, the operational steering committees, between operational and exec steer committees. You simply just need to sort of find more natural, disagreeable people who are not afraid to point out what can be done better. And
that's not that kind of reluctance to speak out isn't something that you'll normally see within your exec steering committee, is it?
No.
They're normally pretty happy to tell you what they think.
Exactly. They're quite proud, actually. It's sometimes quite challenging to shut them up.
Yes, indeed. That tends not to be the issue at the exec steering committee level. The issues that you see is really around, are people showing up? And that's the real warning sign there. So, if people aren't turning up to these exec steering committees, it tends to point to issues with your scoping phase, that you didn't do sufficient work on your business case, getting people bought into it. The sponsor perhaps hasn't done enough around building that willing coalition of execs to really make this happen and embed this really important change. So
those individuals don't feel it's important to them. They don't feel, well, I've got no stake in this. What's in it for me? So you're absolutely right. If we're seeing a lack of attendance, then you have to seriously question why that is.
And it could be because something external's come along, crikey, there's a number of transformation programs the world over right now that have just stopped. Because there's a more pressing issue.
Yeah, absolutely. But that shouldn't be persistent, right? Where non-attendance in one, because these meetings, they're not happening shouldn't be happening every week. They should be happening at key stages of a program.
Yeah. So have you got your cadence right?
Yes.
But in terms of that attendance, it has to be the program sponsor that's the individual that's going to go and have these conversations with the members of the exec steerco. It's just not a conversation that a transformation lead or a program manager should ever be having. That's just not their role.
No, absolutely not. No. But a program manager can help by ensuring that there is regular drumbeat of meetings. They should bring their experience of other programs to ensure that the governance meetings are held at appropriate intervals for decisions at hand, right?
Yeah.
Their review materials, for instance, are sent ahead of time. They come prepared to answer detailed questions about the health of the program. And the transformation lead, on the other hand, has got to play an active role in these meetings. They should be the ones leading presentations, for example.
Yeah, and that doesn't always happen, does it?
It doesn't. No.
They can kind of get a bit reliant on the program manager.
Yeah. It feels like it's the program manager that's sort of leading the transformation almost.
Yeah.
So and again, the transformation lead have got to be prepared to sort of defend solution designs that have come through the various other governance bodies, etc. And program sort of delivery decisions, but equally know as well when to take steer and input from members of the committee. It's not, again, this is not a war, not going in to fight people. It's you making sure that you're leveraging the knowledge of the people in the room and the expertise of the people in the room and take steer from them. Is really important. These governance meetings should not be something to fear. It should be something to look forward to, because you're going into these meetings taking the time of fairly experienced individuals and expensive individuals. So make good use of their time. To help steer your program in the right way. So exchange, and let's be honest, these are senior individuals, so exchanges within the exec steering committee will be robust. And they should be robust. So it's important that your transformation lead is politically savvy to be able to think on their feet too. So again, as a program sponsor, if you're looking to appoint a transformation lead into this role, think through what you're going to put that individual through. They're going to be facing members of the exec. They're going to be challenged. So they've got to have that, ability to think on their feet, to be agile.
And so, they've got to be that's kind of one thing when things are going well, but you need to be confident that you can put them in front of exec members when things are really not going well, and they can handle that pressure and represent you and your function well in front of those exec and not crumble, frankly.
Yes, exactly.
Because we've seen that happen in the past, sadly.
And it can be destroy someone's career, for instance, at times.
Absolutely.
The other thing that a transformation lead needs to be is involved in the detail. When they are being asked difficult questions from those in the exec steering committee, if they don't know the detail and they're heavily reliant on a program manager, this could be really concerning for the program sponsor.
Because the last thing you want is people to lose confidence in an individual and then therefore the program, and no one wants those difficult conversations at all. So really think through the individual that you put into that role, because it will, as you say, it will make or break their career. Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of stepping back out of that meeting a little bit, we touched on previously these client-side advisors when we talked about suppliers a few weeks back. So I think it's worth just a quick recap, seeing as we're talking about governance, where client-side advisors are best used, and anywhere you shouldn't use them within the governance structure.
Yeah, I mean, we found that they're best used in one of two ways. Firstly, advising design teams,
Mm.
either working directly with process owners, for instance, or supporting the transformation lead at design authority level.
Yeah.
They've been there, they've done it, they know where the pitfalls are, right?
Yes.
So they can identify quickly some of the designs that you're coming up with are going to give you problems in A, B, and C. So
Yeah.
they can play a really sort of pivotal role in these groups. Secondly, it's providing challenge and technical knowledge at the exec steering committee level,
Yeah.
especially if the exec team lack hands-on experience of a new piece of technology that you're implementing.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the voice of reason in a room to maybe the program manager or the transformation lead, who might be overly enthusiastic or overly optimistic about what's being done at the program level, and are not really aware of some of those pitfalls that are coming down the line around some of the decisions that might be being made. We found that actually adding client-side advisor into an operational steering committee level is perhaps less useful. The purpose of this body is to validate that the solution designs are fit for purpose to meet the business needs. And the best people to make the judgment are the operational managers of the organization.
Yeah.
An external advisor will lack the detailed understanding of how the business operates to add much value in those decisions.
So finally, just to kind of start wrapping things up for today's episode, one of the common failings that we see in programs that kind of get into trouble is a lack of documentation around the key decisions that are made during governance meetings. Let's just dig into that a little bit, because it's an area that quite often gets overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Transformation programs are making large-scale changes to a complex set of interdependent process system and people. So and on an evolving set of sort of business requirements. So keeping track of these decisions in this sort of type of environment goes beyond the ability of any one person to keep in their head, right? So so documenting as you go avoids reopening decisions further down the line. The amount of times that I've heard, why have we made that particular set of decisions, and no documentation to describe the rationale, and then it just means that you're reopening these envelopes all the time, and it's costly. There's rework, delays, and we talked about all the impact of this on technology as you get closer and closer to go live.
Yeah.
However, if design changes enhance the ability to deliver a business case, then it shouldn't be rejected out of hand, even if it's at later phases of testing. We did talk before about the risks of making changes quite late to the program, but if it warrants it, it shouldn't be disregarded. So your governance structure should really be agile enough to consider these changes quickly and take the right call for your business. Sometimes delays and additional costs really are worth it. Okay, so it's important not to totally disregard them. Just make sure you document the reasons why the decision was made, and the information that was available at the time is included within those reasons. And actually documenting your decisions enables you to conduct a much more effective lessons learned after go live, which you can then carry on into future phases of other programs.
And I think that's a great point to end on. And we've said it before, and we'll no doubt say it again, that transformation is a relatively straightforward process, but you have to recognize that you're making changes to this complex interplay of people, process, and technology. So it's not simply possible to map out all these downstream impacts of every decision as they ripple out through the organization, but making sure that you document it and you've got a track of what's happened is going to help you as you go back and review. So just as a bit of a recap, just engaging the right people in reviewing your solution designs and your program decisions are going to help you make the best possible decisions in the moment based on the information that you have at hand. Documenting your design decisions and the business rationale behind them gives you the ability to look back, learn, and refine your solution designs over time, because it's all too easy to lose sight of the fact that this big, showy, multi-million-dollar program that you've got everyone all excited about is in reality just delivering the first iteration of your new operating model. So the capability of your operational teams, the processes and the technology and their readiness to function in this brave new world that you've got in store for them is actually the focus for season 3. Which we're going to cover on transition. But before we get to that season 3, this kind of taking everything into production and kind of launching it out to hopefully a suspecting world rather than unsuspecting world if you've got your change management right. But before we get to that, we're actually going to take some time to deal with the problem that's in front of us. So joining us next week is Lucy Finney, who's our Head of Leadership Development, and we're going to discuss crisis management and recovery. So please join us next week, and we're going to be delving into this in a bit more detail.
Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. So this episode focused on 1 of 10 critical success factors in the build phase of transformation. If you'd like to be at the front of the queue for next week's episode, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget to like the show if you found it useful. If you have any questions or opinions you'd like to share, please reach out, contact us, Joe Ailes or Jason West on LinkedIn or via our website _group.com.